Good morning, everyone. Let me, first of all, introduce the two scientists who are on the stage alongside Jim. Jim needs no further introduction. Dr. Konstantinos at the very far end, and Dr. Alexandre on the next seat to him, both of whom are physicists, both of whom are involved in quantum computing, both of whom are perhaps in the top dozen or so people in Europe involved in the intersection of AI with biology and with complex systems, and both of whom happen to be my colleagues. What I'd like to do is kick this session off by a short series of questions just to get the panelists warmed up. They think they know what the questions are that I'm going to ask. Little do they know that that order has changed, except for you, Jim.
Oh, thank God.
Jim, I've known you since 1984. We have the mutual privilege of being friends. And one of the things that, over the time that I've known you, that marks you out is that you are very often the first investor, or at least the first observer, of shifts which are global. I won't bore the audience or you with recounting all of the areas that I know where you have been first, but two or three do stand out. Property in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. I remember a trip with you into Berlin at that time. Of course, the dawn of the internet, when most people were wondering what the thing actually meant. But as far as today is concerned, I want to remind the audience that you are probably the first mover from an investment standpoint in what is commonly referred to as the field of longevity. There's a wide spectrum within longevity, and my first question to you, Jim, is in the time that you've been focused on this field, what is it that has changed today compared to when you first started becoming interested in that area?
Thank you very much, Ilyas. But before I get to Ilyas's question, I would like to say that anyone who's at the back, please take a seat, because here you have probably the most successful tech entrepreneur in the UK's history, sitting next to me on my left-hand side, founder of Quantinuum, with two of his colleagues here. Quantinuum is the world's leading quantum computing company. It is 1,000 times better than Google, whose market valuation has gone up dramatically as a result of their efforts in quantum. And it's going to make an enormous splash, not only in the finance world, but in our lives, including, I guess, in biology. And we would love to do stuff with Ilyas and Quantinuum. We're very lucky to have Ilyas here today, and he's also speaking on his own later on to tell you a bit more about quantum computing towards the end of today's Master Investor. But we are very lucky. Ilyas, I'm so grateful to you. I'm also very grateful to be a shareholder in Quantinuum. So I'm expecting that at this time next year, I will not be in this hall. I'll be in the Bahamas, enjoying a luxurious White Lotus lifestyle, thanks to Ilyas and his colleagues' efforts. So thank you very much indeed. Now, I won't go into this in any great detail because even though I'm an investor in Quantinuum, I'm by no means expert in any aspects of quantum, except to say that at Juvenescence, which is our longevity company, of which I'm proud to be a co-founder, we have AI, which will be followed by quantum, embedded at every step of the way in our progress towards developing drugs, which lead to, first of all, healthier lifespans, and second, lead potentially to extensions of lifespans. It is very important that we do something about our aging society. 1 in 4 people in many societies around the world are already over 65, and in some countries it's 1/3. 1 in 4 countries around the world have a population which is now declining. So you're getting an aging population which is getting older because people are living longer, but for whom fundamental health is not necessarily improving. So people are getting these so-called comorbidities like heart disease, cancer, obesity, diabetes, dementia, increasingly because they're living longer. It is now the first time to get back to your question, Ilyas, the first time in the 8 or 9 years that I've been interested in the longevity space that we can see real live trials taking place which may well have a positive outcome on that aging process, on keeping people healthier for longer. Because let's face it, we're all going to have to work longer because there just isn't enough money or enough young people to go around to either support old people or to give them the money that the retirement systems are currently promising them. We need to do something about that. So quantum is going to be very important in this, and that no doubt the gentleman will be talking about. But in Juvenescence, in our pipeline, we have several real live clinical trials in patients going on at the moment. We are fully engaged with AI, and we will be talking to Quantinuum about trying to use their systems to improve, to accelerate the process of trialing. At the moment, it costs $2 billion to develop a successful drug, and it can take upwards of 10 years. We want to compress that period by accelerating the process of drug discovery. With AI, we know that we can shave 3 years off that 10-year process already, and with quantum, it could be even faster. And with bioinformatics, with things like biomarkers and aging clocks, and by the way, you can have your chronological age measured against your biological age here at the Deep Longevity stand for free today if you go and seek Deep out, that's his name, Dr. Deep, who's doing that. We're going to be able to accelerate that trial process and develop lots of new drugs that are going to be appropriate to the aging population that we are experiencing. It's not a bad thing that the populations are getting older, it's just a new challenge for the world. So I'll give you one example before I move on and hand back to Ilyas. There was a company called Reata, which I knew quite well, I was an investor in, and it failed in a phase 3 trial for development of drugs for kidney failure. And so some AI guys who are here on the right-hand side were put in there, and they repurposed the drug using AI and going back over all the old trial data, and they worked out that actually the drug would be better used for something called Friedreich's ataxia. So Reata, which a year and a half ago was on its knees, developed this drug for Friedreich's ataxia as a result of the efforts of Rule of 5, and they came up with this successful drug, and as a result, Biogen bought them for $7.2 billion in cash. So AI is already having a positive effect in the biology of longevity and science, and those Rule of 5 people are now joining Juvenescence. So that's my little intro. Thanks, Ilyas.
No, thank you, Jim. I think that the direction for the next 15 or so minutes will really take the form of a step back and then a step forward. And in taking a step back, what I'd like to do is turn to my two colleagues, first of all, both of whom come from an AI background where scientific discovery is the objective of using AI. So this is not about necessarily looking at using AI to answer questions where the answer already exists. So we might go to ChatGPT or Llama and ask it a question where somewhere, somehow, the answer exists. Scientific discovery is what creates life and creates the environment in which life can prosper. And of course, over the past 11,000 years, as humanity has gone from whatever it was like 11,000 years ago to today, each spurt where we increase our lifespan, we can be better and healthy in what we do, of course, has been led by scientific discovery. So, first of all, Kraji, what is it that you think is important to look at when we think of AI for scientific discovery, but particularly biology?
So if I can pick up on something that Jim just said, when you looked at his pipeline for drug discovery, one thing that emerged is interdisciplinarity. If you look at what happens in the last decades of science, you started to see the emergence of pockets of interdisciplinarity. Let me explain. We have, for instance, bioinformatics, that is the marriage between computer scientists and biologists. You have artificial intelligence, that is the marriage between cognitive scientists and computer scientists. And you also have quantum computing, that is a marriage between physicists mathematicians, and computer scientists. I think the next steps is to have an interdisciplinarity at large scale, where we can integrate all existing technologies in an objective-driven manner to solve specific problems. And this is where we're going to see most of the impact, and we have to merge all those disciplines to achieve this.
Konstantinos?
So we should really zoom back from what Kraji said, take it really seriously in the sense of applying interdisciplinarity in practice and considering what scientific discovery is about. So to come back to what Jim was saying, we should really consider longevity as the fundamental problem of life. This is, at first sight, a trivial tautology, but if you reconsider this idea, longevity is about everything. It's about biology, but if you zoom back and consider resilience of complex systems, it's not about biological organisms anymore. It also can be about whole economies or companies or whole societies, or in the very long term, a whole planet even. So if you take a very scientific, disciplined approach to the problem of longevity and apply all the available tools that exist, and tools can be simple algorithms that have been working since decades, or new high-tech AI data-driven approaches like we have seen have been very impactful, like the latest, for example, Nobel Prize was awarded to Google DeepMind for their work in protein folding, or such results that we see every day with new drugs coming up out of nowhere because AI has been applied for a specific scientific discovery use case rather than finding facts on the internet, as you say. So that's my view, building on what Kraji said.
Thank you. A few weeks ago, I was in Los Angeles on a panel that involved a name, blast from the past for some of you might remember, Mike Milken, who's very heavily invested in longevity, not quite as the same foresight as you, Jim, but nevertheless, he was interviewing Deepak Chopra. And Deepak said that for the first time in his career, he feels excited about the impact of actual technology on biological systems. And Jim, as you know, and some people in the audience know, my company and my business was inspired by Stephen Hawking. I was the chairman of the Stephen Hawking Foundation, and Stephen felt that the primary reason why he was excited about quantum computing was the impact on biological systems. So I'd like to ask you, Konstantinos, first. What is it about the marriage of quantum computing and AI that makes you most excited about the use of technology for biological systems and longevity and scientific discovery?
Right. So if we consider these new technologies working together, of course there is an obvious angle to this, which is AI for scientific discovery could enhance the very timeline and roadmaps and development of quantum computing technology. The other way around, the whole point of building quantum computers is that they are fundamentally different machines. They work fundamentally differently versus classical computers, which means that they can do things that you cannot do classically. This unlocks new problems, gives us access to new data, and this data can then be fed, supplemented to our existing data to train AI systems. And then we go from there to new possibilities.
Kraji?
And I would say the framework that Konstantinos just mentioned is actually much broader. Nowadays, we see the emergence of a number of substrates of computation. Quantum computing allows you to get data that you'll never be able to obtain classically, so you could potentially use those data and feed them into an AI system. But you could also use digital twins, biological twins, any other type of substrates, and we realize for the first time in history we have sources of data that we never had access before, and we need actually to harvest new data from that because we've already used more or less everything that was around us. So we're in this really interesting era where we can actually generate this new meaningful data and use it downstream.
There's been a lot of talk about data. Data can mean many things to many people. However, Existing large language models, existing large code LLMs are restricted in what they can and can't do by what already exists. However, what doesn't exist in the form of knowledge that is tappable by these language models is greater than what exists. We get overwhelmed by numbers. We are told about the trillions of tokens that OpenAI uses or DeepSeek might use. But this is a fraction of the information that nature holds. Nature holds it in a way that we humans cannot access because it is quantum. Kraji, why is it that that data, which has until now been withheld from us, which is one of the reasons why creating a new drug takes so long, and why the focus on safety, i.e. not knowing what the impact will be of that drug, not only in terms of the good, but potentially the bad. Jim's point about the time it takes and the value that is given to drug discovery and clinical trials. What is it about quantum computing that allows us finally, the whole of mankind, to access this data?
Okay, I see where you're coming from. So if I can rephrase, before that, we realize we can unlock new data. Those data can be fed into an AI system, so it's kind of science for AI. But the other side of the story is AI for science. So the what next, the what are you doing this for? Enhancing the capabilities of AI can, of course, allows you to have a better ChatGPT, but it can also allow you to solve problems, meaningful problems in mathematics. You can prove new theorems. You can also use AI in engineering to enhance and improve the fabrication, the design of chips. You can also use AI in robotics, but those problems are somehow kind of closed-ended. If you want to go toward an open-ended problem, go towards biology, towards longevity. Try to find the mechanisms of life and use AI for this type of problem. So for me, and I think we're aligned with Konstantinos, for the most important problems where AI could actually have an impact is in biology due to the open-endedness of the field.
I was in Iceland, as you know, Konstantinos, a few weeks ago. Iceland is the home of a company called Decode. If you guys are at all interested in longer lives and lives lived with dignity, I encourage you to visit the website of Decode. It is run by an incredible scientist called Kauri Stephenson, who's been trying to unpick the secret of life through genomics. They're ready to use quantum computers. Konstantinos, what is it in the field of genomics that will be unlocked for the benefit of humanity by quantum computers first, and what do you think that timeline is?
Right. So in Quantinuum, we have been working very hard to shave off quantum resources that are necessary for quantum algorithms to surpass classical algorithms for some specific problems. And these specific problems are about extracting information about the shape of data. You will Google the words knot theory or topological data analysis, and you will find many interesting shapes and pictures. And what this means is basically that if you have huge data sets from longitudinal studies or patient data or genomic data, these data sets are huge. They're terabytes at this point, even more orders of magnitude than that. And so what you can do with a quantum algorithm is extract specific features from them. These features are like fingerprints of the data that allow you to characterize them. And you can take these features and supplement them to other features that you're extracting classically. And then downstream, these are fed to AI systems that are classifying and analyzing this data so that we can solve other tasks like diagnosis tasks or prediction tasks and so on and so on. So quantum computers are coming in the beginning of pipelines for drug discovery or diagnosis pipelines to supplement with, as we were saying before, new data that you cannot have access to with any other method on this universe other than with quantum computing. And then we can solve new problems that we could not solve before.
Konstantinos is being very modest. 3 days ago, he and his colleagues published a paper on knot theory that lends itself directly to DNA mutation. It's a little bit dense, that paper, but there is an accessible version online that you can read about, which explains why this is fundamental in genomics. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of my colleagues on the panel to tell me, if they had a magic wand, what is it that they would like to solve? The only caveat is that they have to have a rooting in the technology that we've just been talking about. Of course, I'd like to jump off and go down a black hole, but that is out of bounds. I'm going to ask my two junior colleagues first to come in, and I'd ask you to restrict yourselves to a minute, and we're going to finish with Jim. Konstantinos?
Okay, magic wand. I see the magic wand as a conductor's baton. And I also see, as I said before, longevity from an abstract point of view. Longevity is about increasing coherence and harmony and homeostasis in complex systems. And that's what a conductor does to an orchestra. And now to make it grounded, with available technology, regarding available technology is very powerful. We have seen in small pockets of scientific discovery, as Kraji was saying, amazing successes. But I don't think we have fully extracted all of the juice from the technology we have today. Even if we stop inventing things today, there's still a lot of room, untapped potential in optimizing what we have today and making optimal use of it, repurposing, building new pipelines with existing technology. So I can dream big, but even if I don't discover anything new, I think there's a lot to be done for the very problems we have been discussing today.
Kraji?
I really like your vision of having an orchestra and a maestro. Nowadays, we have more technologies than we've ever had in the history of mankind. And we've really explored a number of technologies, but now it's time to exploit them all together. And the grand vision of this maestro could be to create this self-sustaining, self-referent loop between AI, science, and society. And I think as final words, Konstantinos, Jim, and Ilyas, you can agree with me that the impact of AI on science and society will be irreversible, and it will stem inside longevity research.
Later on this afternoon, I'll be taking a very easy to understand walk through what is likely to happen in the next 5 years that unlocks this, and the maestro being a quantum computer and all of the technologies that we currently have being harnessed. Jim, final word is yours.
Thank you, Ilyas. And you've been a fantastic maestro for us on the stage today. So I'm just going to briefly give you some real live examples of where we're at and how in the next 10 years. And so Brian Johnson, who's a bit of a nutcase, but nonetheless very famous for his longevity exploits, says don't die. And that's true. Don't die in the next 10 years because there'll be such great stuff available for all of us that there will be a remarkably different world. But the first true longevity drug is available now. And those are the GLP-1 agonists that you're all familiar with, like Ozempic and Wegovy and so forth. And they're having a remarkable effect, not just in reducing obesity and therefore diabetes and other comorbidities of obesity, but in terms of cardiovascular protection and in terms of neuroprotection. So they are the first true drugs that relate to longevity. And their peak sales will be something like $150 billion a year by 2030, which is 10 times more than the previous top drug, which was Humira, before that. So there's not just great human impact, but also fantastic impact in terms of finances, which is why Novo Nordisk is bigger than the GNP of Denmark. But in our own portfolio, we have assets in the clinic, and I just want to highlight a couple of them, both of which relate to AI. One is, you may have heard about the frog's legs that have been cut off and regrown by using electrical methods. That's a juvenescence company. It's called Pharmaceuticals. This is something really super, and it uses AI as an embedded tool in what it's doing. This was internationally famous, and they're making great progress, but it's some years away. But we also have a really exciting thing in the clinic which uses AI at the moment. We have 8 patients dosed. None of them had any adverse effects. This is regrowing liver tissue in situ by transplanting hepatocytes, which are liver cells, into lymph nodes adjacent to the failing organ. Those lymph nodes act as biological ectopic bioreactors to produce new liver tissue. This company's now got 8 patients as ascending doses. It will be reading out by the end of this year. We did 400 large animal studies in this. None of them failed. So there's every reason to suppose that very soon people will be able to, with failing livers and therefore failing pancreases, kidneys, etc., to have their organs regrown in situ, rather like classic cars having their parts replaced. This is really exciting. It's in human beings at the moment in phase 2 trials in the United States, and I'm very proud to be on the board of that company and to have been through its journey. So Ilyas, again, thank you so much for doing this today, and also for your fabulous talk that's coming up later on. Please, everyone, thank Ilyas in particular for putting this all together.